You know, it's no secret of my passion for a Celica ST185, and especially my car. I mean, it means such a lot to me because of the 4 months I spent in Kenya testing this car when it was brand new, and then leading into my first World Championship victory in Argentina with Juha Kankkunen, but then also winning 3 rallies in total in 1993, finishing up with a very icy Lombard RAC, or what was it called then? The Network Q Rally, I think it was called. But this car to me was quite special for that reason, which is why I chose to own one and get a proper factory car rebuilt. Now, my little corner of the workshop over here, I set up probably about 2.5, 3 years ago now for a good friend of mine, Don Woolfield, who I'm very proud to say is here with me today, just to talk a little bit more in depth about the car and about Toyota Team Europe. We'll shorten it to TTE for the benefit of this video, but it was very special in so many different ways. And Don, come and join us. You know,
Hi, Nick.
Thanks for coming, Don.
You're welcome.
So Don, as RDR Developments, has basically taken this car from something that, you know, there was a lot of, it's fair to say there was a lot of bits missing, Don, wasn't there?
There was. It'd been a little bit cannibalized.
Yeah. And you've basically rebuilt it almost from bottom to the way up. And okay, engine rebuilds and everything else has now been done. But I know that you're as passionate for TTE and the Celica because you were there as a car builder back in the day. Ended up as a car builder, but you've been through the whole operation, haven't you?
Yeah, correct. I started off in the sub-assembly room, did 18 months doing suspension, brakes, power steering, pumps and racks, then moved from there into the car build site, and in between that was doing a lot of testing. 93, I tested with the first one of these, was Monte Carlo test. Me and a guy, Belgian guy, we built the first car and ran it and took it to the test.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
So right there from the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, I've obviously been embroiled in testing with Juha and everything else. Your time was spent mostly in the workshop, but then going out on events and tests. The team was special, wasn't it? What do you think that made TTE as good as it was and as wonderful it was back in the day?
Probably we were one big family, 26 nationalities, and with one goal, and that was to win.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
I can see you get very emotional about it. It does mean a lot to you, mate, doesn't it? But I think gelling it all together really was the passion of Uwe, who unfortunately is not with us anymore. But, you know, being a successful driver in his own right, decided to set up a Toyota team, didn't he? Yep. And this whole TTE thing just grew from there, really, didn't it?
Unbelievable. Good boss, good leader.
Yeah.
Loved the boys.
Yeah.
Had loads of time.
Yeah.
He'd come down into the workshop every night. Got any issues, boys? Let's sort them out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, you know, I think that's what makes it special in so many other ways, because I think the sport has changed a lot to where we are now. I mean, there's so many other politics involved, but with Uwe, he took care of what little politics there were, but his time was making sure the team was right and they got everything they needed. And we never really wanted for anything, did we, back in the day?
Not at all. You know, if there was an issue, it'd be next, you know, if we had a problem at one rally, it'd be fixed by the next rally. It'd be right, boys, what do we need to go forward? And that was the way it worked, you know, with the engineers and stuff. He'd come back and go, right, regroup, let's sort the issues and let's go faster.
Yeah.
And that's what we did.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No stone left unturned. I know it's an old cliche, but it really did mean something, didn't it?
Oh, totally.
Tell me, how many people, I mean, I can't remember, but roughly how many people, and we're talking 1993, which is just over 30 years ago, were at TTE when we were rallying these things?
Would have been probably 200.
That's a big team.
There was a big team, and there was lots of different sectors as well. You know, we had the workshop, we had a composite department, engine department, gearbox department. We had a special development area as well. So it was really, for us, based in the workshop, it was hard to tell how big it really was.
Yeah.
You know, there was management, but it was huge.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. But I mean, they say that rallying's too expensive nowadays, but the teams are arguably, when you look at them on event, a fraction of the size that we'd have. Monte Carlo, we'd have 100 people at Monte Carlo. I remember that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, well, nowadays you'd have far less than that. But, you know, we're talking a period of rallying, arguably for some in Group A, were the best years because they bounced off the back of Group B being banned, too fast, too dangerous, and in came Group A. It took a few years by the time they came round to developing a car that really started to work really well. But the 185 came back off the 165, didn't it?
Correct. Yep.
And the 165, while didn't TT win a world championship with 165 with Carlos?
Yes, correct. Yep.
But there were issues, weren't there? There were some things that they couldn't overcome with.
I think a big problem with the 165 was keeping the underbonnet temperature down.
Yeah.
That's why you'll always see pictures of a TTE car with the headlights up. And that was to reduce underbonnet temperatures. I think I will say the handling side of it, they wanted to make it a bit more precise. So that's why we changed the suspension in the 185 to the 165. At the beginning of 185, we were using 165 suspension, and then we developed a new suspension to go into the 185.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, leading on, and probably as a car manufacturer, they wanted always to promote the new model, and everything moves on and be rejuvenated, and the 185 was it. Now, when you look around the car, basically the body shape was road car, wasn't it? That was the whole thing about Group A. It had to look like a standard car. But I didn't quite realize until we got it and started working on it and you telling me stuff, how when you start to take these things apart, nothing mechanically is necessarily standard, is it?
No, these cars when they were built were a hand-built car. So, you know, people think we just got a road car and pulled it apart, put the go-fast bits and sent it. But no, everything on these is custom-made and hand-built. And people that have bought them now and rebuilt them over the years have realised that no many parts off the shelf fit them. Yeah. You've got to, you know, modify, change, remanufacture, and carry on. You know, it's not just straightforward as people think.
No.
And to get a road car, one of these to go fast, is a little bit of work. There's not many off-the-shelf parts that you can buy, bolt them in there, and get the job done.
Yeah, even the most simple things you would have thought in this car is modified by TT to make it more efficient and better than it was. If we start looking around the car, when you look at the front, Don, I think they've opened up the front to get better airflow, didn't they? But it was the addition of the big hole here in the bonnet with the scoop to suck the hot air out and the vents at the rear of the bonnet here that just help get rid of all that heat buildup from turbo and exhaust, because these things are red hot in competition, aren't they?
Totally.
And that cured it all, didn't it?
Well, yeah, a large majority of it, yes. Because, you know, when the air intake charge gets too hot, then you lose horsepower.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to maintain was, you know, horsepower.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, the other thing, and I think we'll open up the bonnet a little bit as well so we can have a look inside, because this is probably more what people are interested in. Like when you look under the bonnet, basically, as a 185, there's a lot of stuff stripped out. Battery and the old standard airbox here is all gone, and we've got a big air inlet here, which is fed with fresh air directly from the front. So that, again, is designed to make sure that the engine's getting as cooler air as possible. You know, off the back of this hole in the bonnet to take, which is directly above this red-hot turbo and exhaust manifold, that heat is taken out of a lot of the heat is taken out of the engine. But there's actually two water systems as well, Don, isn't there?
Yes, correct. This, being the Carlos Sainz edition, comes with a water-to-air intercooler system.
Right.
which therefore keeps the intake charge a lot cooler. A lot of the road cars came with just the air-to-air. So they had the intercooler mounted up here and used the air coming through the bonnet to cool the charge and then go into the... But because the rally car version, we run a sub-radiator in the front that runs to a pump, and that pumps it through the charge cooler and back down. Therefore, brings the intake temperature down. We're sort of aiming around about 76-degree mark to keep the air intake temperature down.
Right. And I remember that on this, and we've got it fitted on this car, it also had a water spray system, which was a part of the standard car, wasn't it?
Yes, correct. Mounted in the bumper.
Right, okay.
Yep.
So again, that just helped keep that cooling temperature down, so the engine's getting cool air. The whole water system is so efficient on this car. It not only just cools, so the engine temperatures, we're not talking about the air temperatures going into the engine. The engine temperatures were kept under control, but also the water system actually cools the oil, and it also cools the gearbox oil. But then first thing in the morning, when you start the car up in Parc Ferme, after 10 minutes, all of a sudden your oil temperatures are up to operating temperature and you haven't even gone anywhere. And that's because it actually warms the oil as fast as the water temperature rises, but then the water system keeps it all down to a working temperature. So unlike other cars that has a lot of air oil coolers, this doesn't got any of that, has it?
Well, it runs a thing called a heat exchanger.
Right.
And the heat exchangers work so that it has the gearbox and engine oil coming through an exchanger, and then has coolant coming through the other side as well. So everything's, as you say, comes up to temperature evenly.
Yeah.
Which is great. And you know, because of limited space, the heat exchanger works really well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a couple of additions which you wouldn't see in here with obviously the braking system and all the master cylinders. What do you call these things, Don?
The reservoirs for the,
yeah, oh my God.
brake and clutch reservoirs.
Yeah, I am a co-driver, you know, so please excuse me. But under the bonnet here, what is there that's pretty special, that something I wouldn't understand, but you certainly would, that people would find interesting, Don?
Probably just the layout and the plumbing and piping side of it's quite unique. The turbos are special. They're made of special material. And yeah, you know, and the internals of the engine's like strong, very strong.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
I knew that, just had it rebuilt. My God. Anyway, don't. That's rallying for you. Nothing's cheap nowadays. But I know that, you know, in the gearbox as well, that was designed by a British company, wasn't it? X-Track.
Yes,
originally.
correct. Yeah, yep.
And the gearbox casing's magnesium. Now, you try and find magnesium casings now, my God. That is a nightmare in its own way, isn't it? But the whole gearbox side of things matched up with the engine. It was just a really solid, dependable unit, wasn't it?
Well, the beauty we had with the X-Track gearbox is we had adjustability. We could take a gear cluster out in 12 minutes and you could put whatever ratios you wanted in there. So we had different ratios for tarmac, different ratios for gravel.
Right.
But the beauty was, if we broke a gearbox, we didn't have to take the complete unit out. We could just take the cluster out and put a new cluster in, fill up with oil and send it.
Yeah, so it was designed
to be worked on.
And speedily and efficiently as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, the whole car was.
Yeah, yeah. I know that everything around here, there is a lot more space than you'd find in a standard car. But, you know, basically, not that I got involved in anything under the bonnet when I was competing, but generally it was service work during the rally because the thing was developed so well. They were so strong, Don, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. You know, main service every night. It'd be, you know, change engine and filter, engine oil and filter. It'd be gearbox out, another gearbox in. And again, change the gearbox oil. We'd probably put fresh suspension on, which would be struts, brakes, calipers. It would all go on, and dry shafts if they needed it.
Yeah.
You know, but it was all designed to be done quickly.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
You know, in Portugal Rally, where the event was half tarmac, half gravel, we could change a complete car from gravel spec to tarmac spec in 45 minutes.
Yeah, and that's probably, if a garage had to do that for your average car, was probably a day and a half, 2 days probably.
Yeah, and now in the latest WRC, when I was with Hyundai, we'd have an hour to convert a complete car from tarmac to gravel. So we were doing it in 45 minutes. That was great.
Yeah.
It was great. It was flat out.
But that was teamwork as well.
Oh, yeah. And we were a well-oiled machine, you know. The way we were designed back, you know, the way we were taught back then is you had to work on every corner of the car. And sometimes you wouldn't even be working on the car you built. You know, one rally you could be on the left front corner, the Oriole car. The next rally you could be on the right front on Kankkunen's car. There was no, and it was good because no one got complacent. You all had to know the whole car, not just one corner or one area.
Yeah.
And that's what made us good mechanics at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, every driver had his own little trick or choice of gear ratio or caster camber settings and what have you. And the spec sheet from TT was quite interesting when you actually set in and start reading it, and how every car was, albeit the same, was different in so many different ways as well.
But yeah, and to get that spec sheet, we'd spend 2 weeks testing.
Yeah.
For each rally. So we'd go away, take a test car, get the first driver in, we'd test with him, get his spec, and then I'd write up and then get the next driver in, set the car up for him. So I'd be changing seats, steering wheel. It could be master cylinders if he wanted. And then we'd do his setup, and then we'd do all the drivers that have their setup all ready for the start of the rally. Then we'd get the spec sheet on the car build. Sub-assembly room would get it, and then we'd build the parts to suit and have the car ready to start on what spec they wanted.
And then I guess a part of the whole thing was then making sure that the relevant specification parts, replacement parts, are in the service vans and the workshop trucks and everything else that turned up on the events, to make sure that you could fix absolutely anything as the rally went on.
Yeah, well, we had 15 service mercs, and we would have had enough bits in there probably to rebuild 2.5 cars.
My God.
There was that many bits. We had body panels, we had gearboxes, dry shafts, discs. The only thing we didn't have was engine. We had turbos, we had parts for turbos. Vans were really well set up.
I could imagine.
And they could handle too. They were good.
Yeah, they were good. They were great looking vans, I have to say.
Yeah.
And, you know, flown all over the world as well.
Yeah.
You know, amazing. It was amazing. From the performance side, the engine and transmission, if we come around the side and start looking at the car, you know, my car predominantly is a tarmac spec car, and you know, it's too nice, and because it's an original Carlos Sainz car, I don't want to go ragging it in forests and on gravel roads anymore. So this is a tarmac spec car. We've got a setup here which is more or less where they ended with the 185, wasn't it, on this car?
Yeah, correct. We're running the aluminium suspension with the steel tubes and the steel bottom spigot, and running the big brakes.
Yeah.
And we can get the big wheels, the 18s on them.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was one thing that had to be modified, I remember, because when Juha crashed my car in Trasmiera Rally, I had to get a new wing. Fortunately, I managed to get one. But the wheel arches have to be modified as well, because they're made for really small wheels. But obviously, with the suspension travel and the turning and everything else that we go through in a rally car, these had to be trimmed and just opened up a fraction, but still keeping that original body shape, which was really important.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
The back of this car, Don, is pretty special, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
And we can talk about it now, but we're not going to be lying on our tummies under the back of the car, but we'll show you what we're talking about. All the tubular frame rear end. When did that actually start coming into play?
That came into play around about mid-92 when we started to bring in the aluminium suspension.
Right.
Because the idea we went with the tubular rear cross member was that we could adjust the roll center of the car.
Right.
And it gave us full adjustability in the rear. The earlier cross member was like a ST185 one, which was a modified standard style pressed steel cross member. It just had uprights to take the different diff, but we didn't have the adjustability of the rear rods up and down.
Right, okay. And that's what we've got on this car, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was the latest spec, effectively.
Yeah.
And then the rear differential, I can't remember any time during my career ever changing anything on the rear diff. They were bomb-proof, weren't they?
Yeah, they were basically a super diff, Mark III super diff.
So that's a rear wheel, a big engined, high-powered rear-wheel drive car,
Six-cylinder car, yeah, turbo six-cylinder car.
Because, I mean, it's a monstrous diff, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was probably over-engineered, but...
It was, but it never failed. We never changed a lot of them.
No.
We changed everything around it, but we never really changed a lot of rear diffs.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's another side of TTE, isn't it, Don, that perhaps people, you know, don't really realize is the fine detail in everything that they do and the way that they prepped cars. You know, it was planning absolutely for the worst and not necessarily hoping for the best. This was planning for the worst, engineering to overcome every little obstacle. And that's what made the car so reliable.
Yeah, correct. You know, we wanted reliability because we wanted points and we wanted to win a championship. And what people don't realize is a lot of attention to detail required to get a car to the end.
Yeah.
And that's the little things that will always let you down, a 50p part, and we had to oversee all of that. And we had car build foremen that used to make sure that they were on the money.
Yeah.
You know, he'd come down and check your work at the end of the day, and if he wasn't happy, it was like, take it off, boys.
I always show people, if I'm showing somebody around the car, talking about this attention to detail, I always talk about that specialist little cap on the handbrake master cylinder, how to help support the circlip, because the brake system goes through that, for the rear brakes, goes through that master cylinder, hitting the brakes hard. It was firing, you know, the handbrake piston forward, and just in case it blew the circlip on the master cylinder, they made this cap to make sure that that circlip would never pop off and start leaking fluid and losing your rear brakes. That was just one little thing. Now, that's the only thing that I really know. But I bet there's 1,000,001 things on this car engineered in the same way, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, totally. Totally. You know, and some car builders had different ideas as well. You know, everyone used to put their own little tweaks into a car.
Yeah.
You know, and that would come down to, you know, personal preference, as long as it was serviceable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could imagine. I could imagine. Well, that was the end of part 1. If you've enjoyed this video, there's a lot more good stuff to come in part 2, which we're going to issue in a few days. So make sure you subscribe and make sure you don't miss it.